3 days had passed since the Arendelle fleet ported in the Weselton harbor. The Duke's forces were quickly subdued, with many abandoning his mission after hearing of his tyranny from Queen Elsa. Anna was freed from her chamber in the manor, and Hans was released from his chains. After the dukedom surrendered, the soldiers from Arendelle stepped in and began helping many of the townsfolk rebuild their beaten, battered homes and shops. Kristoff's wounds were beginning to heal, with much of the swelling in his face subsiding. Queen Anna stayed by his side as he rested for the first 2 days of his recovery, but by the third, Kristoff was up and moving about the manor. After ensuring Anna was safe, there was only one person who Kristoff wanted to see. The two princes of the Southern Isles sat beside each other at the Duke's dining table and were eating their breakfast when the large wooden door swung open. Hans and Lars stood from their seats as Queen Anna entered the large dining hall, with Kristoff following 2 steps behind her. "My queen," the two brothers said simultaneously as they bowed their heads. Hans looked up past Anna to Kristoff. "How are you feeling, Kristoff? Do you need anything?" he asked. Kristoff looked back at Hans with a troubled look on his face as he crossed the room. "Hans," he began as he got closer to the young prince, "Anna told me what you were about to do for me." "Hey," Hans interjected, "you don't have to concern yourself with that." Kristoff looked at Hans. "That's where you're wrong, Hans. If you hadn't stepped in when those guards were beating me in the hallway, I wouldn't be alive right now to thank you. So, thank you, Hans." Kristoff extended his hand and the two shook on what seemed to be a newly forming friendship. Lars walked around the table and pulled out chairs for Kristoff and Anna to sit and join them for breakfast. But as he gestured for Anna to have a seat, she shook her head. "I'm sorry, I won't be able to join you for breakfast," she said. "My sisters asked me to meet with her. We need to have a little chat with the Duke before we return to Arendelle." Anna looked at Kristoff. "You need to eat something," she added. "But," Kristoff protested. Anna stopped him. "No, you need to eat so that you can get better, okay?" Kristoff smiled and nodded as he took a seat at the table. "Lars, Hans, please watch over him," she said to the brothers, who were already sitting beside Kristoff, stuffing their mouths full of food. Queen Anna chuckled and shook her head as she turned and left. She made her way through the halls until she came upon an ornate wooden door. "Where is he?" Anna asked curiously as she entered the bedchamber Elsa had asked her to meet in. Elsa turned from the bay window to face Anna. "The commander is bringing him now," she said as she walked over to greet her sister. "Hopefully we'll have answers soon." They talked for a couple of minutes about all they had been through together since the passing of their parents, but the conversation was interrupted by 3 loud knocks on the door. "You may come in, Commander," Elsa called. The door to the bedroom swung open and Commander Reynolds walked in with his 2 officers, Ingrid and Anders. Between them, in the same chains he had placed on the Ice Queen, stood the former Duke of Weselton. The royal guards walked the man over to a small, splintery chair in the center of the room. Once he took a seat, they all took a step back. "Hello," Queen Elsa began to say. "Duke of nothing." The Duke looked up at the Queens of Arendelle with a scowl on his face. "You don't look too well," Anna said. "Are the dungeons not to your liking?" The Duke's face turned red. "I will not be treated like some kind of animal in my own city," he yelled. The 2 sisters looked at each other and then back at the Duke. "Oh, this isn't your dukedom anymore," Elsa explained. "Your people have spoken, and they will have nothing to do with you after the pain you put them through. You see, unlike you, the people of Weselton are good, kind-hearted, and faithful humans. You, on the other hand, you're just an angry little weasel." "Then what do you want from me?" he exclaimed. "I demand you tell me why I'm here and not on the very platform where I almost took your lover away from you." The Duke was looking at Anna as he referred to Kristoff. Elsa took a step toward the former Duke. "We know that there's more to the story of our parents than we've been told." The restrained man's eyes grew wide. The air in the room began to grow cold as Elsa looked down at the former Duke. "And we know that you played a part in their deaths." "What? No, he stuttered as Elsa leaned down to eye level. She smiled. "I'm going to give you one chance to tell me and my sister what really happened to them on the night that their ship went down." "How? How could I possibly know anything?" the man responded. "Because you know about Captain Arthur. He was from your dukedom, wasn't he?" Elsa asked. You should know that we've had a few conversations with Captain Arthur over the past couple of days, and he's truly a wonderful man. I don't believe that he would have harmed our parents." Elsa looked to Anna before continuing her interrogation. "But I believe you did." The former Duke was breathing heavily as he realized that two queens of Arendelle knew more than he expected. "You see, Captain Arthur mentioned a crest on a crate that was filled with the tools used to sink the ship that night. He also mentioned that you had a meeting in your manor with people wearing that same crest." Elsa locked eyes with the former Duke. "So tell me, Duke of Nothing, who are these people, and why did they want to kill our parents?" The former Duke now shivered in his seat as the temperature in the room continued to drop. Anna stepped forward and placed a calming hand on Elsa's shoulder. "It's all right," she soothed. She looked over to the man in the chair. "Tell us what we need to know before it gets too cold and we have to leave you alone in here with my sister." "You wouldn't," he responded. Anna took another step toward the former Duke. "Do you really want to question that after what you did to Kristoff?" The restrained man gritted his teeth in anger before finally submitting. Fine, but I'll only tell you if you promise to spare me. On your honor, I'll get to keep my life." The sisters looked at each other and then back to the former Duke before Elsa responded. "Executions aren't really Arendelle's style. You'll keep your life, Weasel. Just tell us what happened to our mom and dad." The Duke took in a deep breath to explain what happened to their parents. "A few months after your birth," he said as he looked at Elsa, "Queen Iduna approached me with an odd request. She asked me to reach out to her family in the Kingdom of Corona, but she would not tell me the meaning of these secret messages." "The Kingdom of Corona?" Elsa and Anna asked in unison. The former Duke looked at the queens. "Yes, you two have a cousin there. Your mother and father were reaching out to them, and some who found out believed they were orchestrating some sort of trade deal that would affect the economies of many neighboring kingdoms." Elsa looked confused. "Our parents wouldn't do anything to harm the other nations," she said sternly. "Be that as it may, this is what we were told when my men were approached by a group of spies from the independent states of Vesper." The former Duke continued. "They're a neighboring conglomerate of dukedoms, towns, and lordships located southeast of Corona. They're the ones who warned us of the fate that was about to befall everyone because of your parents' actions." "Our parents would never!" Elsa raised her voice as solid particles of ice formed in the air around her. The former Duke quickly interjected. "This is just what we were told. These men came from a city known as Cain, and they warned me and my officers to cooperate with them. They paid me to change out 3/4 of Arthur's men on his ship with spies of their own, and promised that the dukedom would flourish." The former Duke slowly hung his head. "Clearly, they lied to me," he said, thinking about the disheveled state that Weselton had been in. The former Duke looked up at Queen Elsa, whose glare was powerful enough to kill in that moment. He closed his eyes, expecting a terrible punishment to come, but was surprised when he heard the sound of footsteps leading toward the door. "Take him back to his cell in the dungeon," Elsa called back to Commander Reynolds as she and Queen Anna left the room. The two queens of Arendelle regrouped with Kristoff and the two princes of the Southern Isles, where they relayed what the former Duke had told them. The group spent 2 more days in the manor to make sure that the dukedom of Weselton was properly cared for while the townsfolk could establish a new duke in the future. By the time their final day in Weselton came to an end, Hans and Lars agreed that they couldn't wait to return to the kingdom of Arendelle. A month had passed since Queens Elsa and Anna returned to Arendelle with their fleet. Since their return, they spent much of their time preparing for their journey to the kingdom of Corona. After making the arrangements with the commander, the group planned to depart from Arendelle within the week. Meanwhile, within the castle, Queen Elsa walked through the upstairs hallway and entered the castle's library. She opened the doors and was pleased to see Hans already standing at the cluttered table looking down at a large map. Hans looked up from the table and smiled at the queen. "Hello, Queen Elsa," he said as he bowed his head. "I've been charting our proper routes that will take us from Corona to the neighboring city of Cain in the independent states of Vesper." Elsa approached the table and looked down at the map and smiled. "This looks great, Hans, thank you." She took a step back and looked the young prince up and down. "I see Ingrid and Anders finally gave you a new uniform." The Queen said, noticing the new leather armor Hans wore. She looked down at his belt. "They even trusted you with a sword, I see." Hans chuckled. "I can't be much of a trainee without one, right?" he responded. "Still, I hope I never have to use it." Hans turned his attention back towards the map on the table. The Ice Queen continued to smile. "You know, Hans, I never thanked you." "Thanked me?" he replied with a tone of confusion in his voice. "If you hadn't been with us in Weselton, who knows what the Duke would have done?" Elsa's mind trailed off as she remembered her brief time as the Duke's prisoner and what he had done to Kristoff. Hans waved at Elsa to get her attention. "You don't need to concern yourself with that, my queen. It's I who should be thanking you." Elsa smiled. "I already heard your thanks in the Weselton Square, Hans." "Then hear them again, and hear them for Weselton," Hans said. "From what our messengers have told us, the dukedom is thriving under the care of Lady Agatha and Captain Arthur." "Agatha and Arthur were suggested by you and your brother, let's not forget that, Hans," Elsa replied. Hans shook his head. "No, you don't understand, Queen Elsa. You and the kingdom of Arendelle have given me a second life." The young prince looked down at his newly crafted armor that bore the Arendelle sigil on the breastplate. "Everything I do now is in your name and in the name of our kingdom." Elsa's face reddened as she continued to smile. She stepped forward and said, "Thank you." She leaned in and embraced Hans. "No, my queen, thank you," Hans thought to himself as he held the Ice Queen tightly in his arms.